This is Center Stage, putting lawyers in the spotlight by highlighting attorneys and other industry experts to help take your law firm to the next level. Hey everyone, and welcome to Center Stage. I am your host, John Henson, and this week, continuing with this business development theme that we've had going for a little bit here, and wanted to talk a lot about your hiring process. I think that this is an area where a lot of small business owners, lawyers, whatever industry you're in, it's an area that you can really improve on. And so this week, I am joined by Allison Williams from a law firm Mentor, and I know she has done a lot of great work in this area, and I thought she would be great to come on and talk about your overall hiring process. So Allison, thank you so much for joining us this week.
John, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Awesome. So yeah, before we jump in, what should we know? Who is Allison Williams?
All right. So I am a business coach for solo and small law firm attorneys, and I own both my own law firm. I own the Williams Law Group in Short Hills, New Jersey, which is a matrimonial and family law firm. We have 8 attorneys and a total of 17 staff altogether. And then I own the law firm Mentor, which is a national coaching company dedicated to helping solo and small law firm attorneys to grow their revenues, crush chaos in business, and make more money.
Awesome. So, you said you had 17 staff members. So you've gone through the hiring process several times at this point. So let's just start, kind of at the beginning here. What are some of the keys in your mind to making a successful hire for your business?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that go into the hiring process, right? There are a lot of great resources out there. And one of the things that we have done is actually distill down some of the key strategies to be able to get the right hire. But the one thing that I would say is probably the key to all of it is to recognize that you are in a process of evaluating not just what's being said to you, but all of the components of who the person is. And so often we get desperate. We need to hire. We wait to hire until we are well past time to hire. And then any old body that comes in that isn't completely a psychopath is on our high list, right? And the challenge then becomes that we are so in angst for ourselves that we really don't spend enough time in the hiring process. So that's the first thing I would say. And then the second thing is really that even if you spend enough time, we spend time listening to what's being said to us. We don't really vet the information. So a hiring process, I very much think of like a dating process, right? You wouldn't meet someone on Monday and say, all right, well, the person and I went on a great date on Tuesday. So Wednesday, I'm ready to get married and lock that down for the rest of my life, right? There's a process of seeing them in their good and their bad, seeing them in different scenarios. They tend to meet people in your inner circle so that those people can also give a perceptual look at that person. And then we all have psychological triggers, things that we are drawn to, things that we are viscerally opposed to, that is both good and bad. And if you don't have someone else, and hopefully multiple people in that process, then you can very easily base your decision on your bias as opposed to what you really need for your company.
Yeah. And, you talk about, vetting people a lot more. I think about our own hiring process, and we'll kind of get to ways that you can make your hiring process more efficient. But one of the things that we do that I really love is we have just this, like, several steps. I mean, we put our applicants through the ringer where, we can get, 1,000 applications on Indeed, but just kind of how we have the job post laid out already vets probably 80 to 90% of them. And so doing a couple things like that, even if it's just one small thing in your job post, like email this address to apply, do not apply through Indeed. You're going to vet a ton of people right off the bat because, a ton of people are just going to sit there, apply, and they're not really looking at what job they're applying for.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is I've seen an uptick in people that will just have a generic resume, and the resume will say, I am an attorney looking for a job in the healthcare industry. And I'll say, well, why are you applying to my family law firm then?
Right.
Like they don't even bother to customize it. And I think it really is because it's a numbers game. So I think people just think if I blast out as many as possible, law of averages, I'm going to pick up on someone who's willing to interview me. But you have to be very discerning. You have to you have to get the right person in. And that, of course, always starts with what you put out there. Yeah. So I hate seeing ads where lawyers will say, here's my law firm, here's how wonderful it is. We've got X number of people, here are our values, and we're looking for somebody who can do A, B, and C. If that sounds like you, apply. Versus writing it like sales copy, where you are really customizing exactly what you are looking for, exactly the person that you want, the values that you want, the attitude, aptitude, and cultural fit for your business. And then putting something enticing in front of that person to speak to whatever pain point led them to your law firm. So it could be that you're looking to bring in somebody who's a higher level employee. So you want to bring in somebody who may have hit a wall in their current position, or maybe they're not being promoted, or they're not earning what they want. Or if you're looking for somebody who's boots on the ground just starting out, which I rarely recommend that you start with a baby lawyer. That's my own bias. I'll acknowledge that. But wherever you're starting, that person probably has different goals, right? They're at the start of their career. They want to be cultivated and nurtured and mentored. So you're going to speak to that. But if you don't speak to what that person's looking for, then you are the commodity, and thus you get a commoditized form of advertisement response, which is, hi, I'm a lawyer, you're looking for a lawyer, or hi, I'm a secretary, you're looking for a secretary. Let's see if this is a match. And then you have to waste your time screening that person, engaging with that person, when you could have just avoided them altogether by writing the ad appropriately.
Yeah. And as you were saying that, I had this huge light bulb moment, because there's a lot of talk right now just about people who are so many people are just unhappy with their jobs. But I wonder how many of those people are unhappy because they did that mass apply, didn't really read the job that they were applying for, and then they get hired and now they're just feeling kind of stuck. But that can go down a whole nother rabbit hole. But just a weird connection that I just thought of. But to your point, though, of customizing that job post and not just making it so generic, but really hammering in on what makes it unique, what you're specifically looking for, all that kind of stuff. What other mistakes have you seen businesses make with their job posts and with their overall hiring process?
Yeah, so there are lots of them. The one that I always say is kind of the glaring error that I see is that people don't actually make applicants perform the job on the job interview. And so I'm a big proponent of making people go through a skills demonstration, and that is not something that I give them in advance. So I like to tell the story all the time about how I love to, cross-examination is my favorite skill, right? I love being in a courtroom. That's kind of my own personal jam, but we don't always prioritize that when we're hiring. It depends on what role we're hiring for. So I have two different divisions of my law firm. We have matrimonial and we have child abuse and neglect. And then the child abuse and neglect division, it's not uncommon that somebody will call us on Monday and say, hey, the state wants to take my child on Tuesday afternoon. Can you be there? And we'll have to be there with no discovery, no knowledge, no information, just a basic consultation from the client. The client doesn't have all the information. The agency holds the cards. So we get there. We're usually served with a complaint that's 2 or 3 inches thick. We have time, 10, 15 minutes to skim it. And then whatever the worker says on the witness stand, you have to cross-examine that person without knowing the answers to what they're going to say. And I know lawyers are always like, we can't do that. And I'm like, yes, you can. Once you learn how to do that, it's actually easier to do that than to ferret through a lot of information, hold that information in your head, and actually have to extract it from someone else. So when I hire somebody for our child abuse division, they have to be able to cross-examine, and they have to be able to do it on the fly, which means when I ask you sitting across from me after we've had a wonderful interview about all of your likes and dislikes and your skills and your benefits and all of that, I then say to you, okay, we're going to do a little scenario now. I'm going to play the caseworker, and my colleague here is going to be the defense attorney or the state's attorney, and you're going to be the defense attorney. And I want you to cross-examine me. I'm going to give you some basic facts as to what I testify to, and I want you to cross-examine me. And some people just immediately shut down. Well, but do I get a fact pattern? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to give you some paper. You can write down whatever notes you feel. I'll take it slow so you have a chance to write them down. Normally you get 10 minutes. I'm going to give you 5 here because you're going to have a simulation of this. And some people rise to the occasion and they kind of figure things out, and they kind of are scrappy. And you know that they don't know everything, right? Because part of your job as the business owner is to train them on what they're going to need to know. You can sharpen their skills, but you can see their gut, you can see their instinct, you can see how well they perform under pressure, you can see how they rise to the occasion. People have completely collapsed under the weight of this exercise. In fact, some people that were actually doing well that I actually disqualified because I said, listen, we need people that have, the kind of titanium stomach that can stand sitting there while someone's child is being taken away from them. And if that's not something that you can do, I'm glad to know that now. I have lots of friends and colleagues. I can refer you to someone who's looking to hire, but this is not the role for you. And that amount of time and energy, by the time we have gotten to this, we've already done a screening interview by another person in my office. We've already had the first round of interview. Usually by the time I meet someone, the only thing that I'm involved in now in my office in hiring is hiring lawyers. So typically by the time I meet that person, everyone has said, yes, this person is the one if you don't see anything wrong. So I am looking for what is wrong, right? I'm very intentional at that point about looking for what's wrong. But most lawyers approach the interview process kind of like first dating, right? We kind of stay at the surface level. We ask the flowery questions. We let the person tell us what they want to tell us. We try to believe what they're saying unless it comes out as completely fraudulent. And we have in our mind, I've got to get a body. I've got to get a body. Any old body will do. Somebody has got to come along. This person could be good enough. And then we start that internal debate. Well, I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this, but I'm desperate, right? They can read and write and speak the English language. Okay, they're good enough, right? And good enough works in a lot of areas in a law firm. It does not work with people.
Yeah. And all of that was just so validating to hear, because we kind of do the same thing with our hiring process where, we kind of have it in two stages where, someone applies the right way. All right, cool. Now we send them like a quiz, like a little at-home quiz that they can do. And we're looking at different things. We look at how, their answers are. We look at, how they responded. Are there any grammatical errors in their response? How much care did you put into that? But then, the finalists that we bring in for a position, we have them do a half day of just some of the work that they would be doing for us in general. And, it's unfortunate, but to your point, we've had people who have interviewed really well and they said all the right things, but then you get them down in there and you see how they work and it's like, it's not quite there, but you're so glad that you did that, because who knows what kind of headaches that would have caused if you had hired them and then got them on payroll and started getting them involved with your clients. And now your name and your reputation's attached to it, and just all the kind of damage that could have done. And so just having those little extra steps in there really does go a long way towards making sure that you got the right person in the right seat.
Yeah. And, it's interesting that you guys do like basically an on-the-job interview, because I think a lot of people are afraid to kind of make that investment of time. But here's the thing, if you make the investment and you get them on payroll, it's going to be much harder psychologically to say, yeah, first week, this is not working out. I'll fire them after I displace them from another job. And now they're income insecure. And now I have harmed by virtue of my own being, my own choice to be precipitous. Yeah. And you also mentioned the quiz. Like, I think that's great. I'm a real big fan of assessments. And I talk a lot about assessments in Law Firm Mentor in general, because there's a lot of things that are under the hood that we don't know about a person and even wouldn't necessarily detect from a very thorough interview, right? So a lot of times I've talked to people about assessments and they've said, well, I don't really need that because we don't just ask surface level questions. We go pretty deep. We look at values. We look at, what their goals are for their career. We really make sure they're a cultural fit. And I say to them, okay, what is their attitude toward authority? And the person kind of says, well, they were respectful during the interview. I said, well, did you expect they're going to be disrespectful to you when they're trying to get you to hire them?
Right.
Well, no. Well, did you ask them questions about, when has a judge really pissed them off and they had to maintain composure? Or how do they regulate their emotions when someone is insulting to them, like an angry client? Ask for examples of that. And well, I kind of asked about that. Well, but did you ask this, right? And one of the tools that I use is the Real Talent Hiring Assessment. I'm a real big fan of Jay Henderson. Shout out to Jay. The Real Talent Hiring Assessment is just brilliant. And I don't get any type of honorarium or fee for recommending it, but I recommend it universally because I use it in my law firm and it's just a really great tool. But it measures people's attitudes toward managing themselves, managing others, and managing tasks. So if you think about what a lawyer has to do in particular, they have to get the work done, right? And how they approach getting the work done is going to tell you how much work they can typically go through, what their response is going to be to that. They have to manage others, whether it is being in communication with staff or managing personnel that you want to get things done for you in adversarial litigation, managing people in the sense of managing your clients and their expectations. And then you have managing yourself, which is, how do you respond when you are told no? How do you engage when you are not getting what you want? What is your overall attitude toward how you fit into a hierarchy if you have a hierarchical office? And a lot of that information is not something that would naturally or even intuitively come up. But then you give them this assessment, and it takes 15 minutes for them to have this fun little game that they play. And the next thing you know, you find out that the person has a real chip on their shoulder when it comes to authority. Or there's somebody who covertly does things their own way, even when you give them a very detailed policies and procedures manual. So knowing that going in doesn't mean that you never hire a person with development areas. We all have them. But knowing that allows you to coach them more effectively, get them onboarded more effectively, and to be on the lookout for the sorts of things that they're going to need to hear, see, and experience in order to be their best self in your office.
Yeah. And, in talking about assessments, so I was not familiar with the one that you mentioned, but we have done several different kinds of assessments here. We started with the Colby, which is similar to kind of what you talk, just in terms of like how someone approaches work and how they get things done. But then we've also started doing, it used to be called Strengths Finder. I think it's called Clifton Strengths now, where it's like 34 different strengths on like different, kind of prisms, whether you're an executor or you're more strategic or you're an influencer or stuff like that. And then there's also Enneagram, which is a little bit more personality based, but you talk about cultural fit and just kind of how different people see things and how they approach things. And that gives you a lot of really good insight that you may not necessarily get in those standard one-on-one interview questions.
Right. And if you're building teams, that's really important, right? So Some people have a very individualistic based practice. In other words, everyone gets a file. That file belongs to you. You take it from beginning to end. And other law firms, there's a lot of interconnectivity and a lot of collaboration. And I handle portions of, and then I hand off to someone else who handles portions of. But whatever your approach is, you're ultimately going to have to interface with other people. And so knowing how they think that's different than how you think allows you to not necessarily immediately change who you are, but allows you to be more effective in communicating and allows you to get more things done because you're talking to a person from their perspective and not yours.
Yeah. So now, all right. So we've talked about our hiring process, gotten them into the interview. We've made a decision. We've got a new employee. And so now it's time to onboard. And you've mentioned kind of a little bit here in the onboarding process. I think you and I both agree you should have some SOPs in place. If you don't, you should go and get those written up right now because that's one of the most important documents you can have in your firm. But another problem is that SOPs often end up getting ignored, whether it's in the onboarding process or even later on down the road. Why do you think that ends up being the case?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons for it. So I think the first thing is that most law firms run with some degree of chaos, right? So I talk about helping lawyers to crush the chaos, and a lot of people assume that means that the papers are flying all over the office and that it's bedlam. And you don't have to have bedlam to have chaos. Chaos is really just disorder in everything or in something that functions in your office so that it affects everything. And so when you think about the chaos in the business, it usually is because people are doing things from memory and people are doing things on the fly. They're not stopping to read a procedures manual. And that's human nature, because if I know that my job is to answer the phones or process the mail or draft the documents, then stopping to read takes me away from my job, right? So I have a limiting activity going on that's stopping me from the thing that's actually going to get me positive incentives from my boss. My boss is going to see me reading and drafting a document and be much more inclined to say, good job, than if I'm deflecting from that to read SOPs. So what I always tell people is you have to involve your team in the systematizing of your business. It's not just that you give them a book and say, here, go read this when something's off, because the instinct of a person is to learn through doing. And then in addition to that, they're going to want to stop and speak to you about whatever it is, either you or someone else. And then you're going to be annoyed and just give them the answer, which will re-incentivize them to continue to interrupt you and ask questions. Instead, you need to have every person in the business be a part of creating better systems in your business. You are always evolving, iterating, and improving your business if you are in business, or else your business is going to become defunct at some point. So you have to think about, how do I involve this person? Well, if you've been in business for 20 years, you may think, well, all of our systems are built now. But there's always something new to be done. There's always a better way. There's always a new piece of technology. There's always a new way of getting something done that your people can be involved in. And with smaller law firms in particular, that opportunity happens more frequently because on average, lawyers turn every 4 years, paralegals turn every 3 years. So if you are in the business of being in business, you're going to have to hire a role more than once. So anytime that you bring someone in, they need to learn what's already there, but they need to learn how to contribute. And when people have the ability to contribute to a job, they're more invested in it, they're more loyal to it, they're more likely to remember, and they're more likely to see it as their job to be following a system, because they want their systems respected just as they want to respect other people's systems that are already given to them.
Yeah. And, it's like systems is actually like one of our core values here, where it's just like, it's a whole mindset. It's understanding that everything has a system and a process, and you're contributing to it. Your business lives and dies by those systems and processes. It doesn't mean that they're the gospel and set in stone, like they can be improved on, whatever, but it's still a guiding light for how you go about and doing everything. And one of the things that I think about as well is, let's say that you're a smaller law firm, you have maybe one or two, outside staff, you're handling all the legal work, but maybe you have a marketing person, maybe you have a receptionist. Still having systems in place for them not only helps them do their job, but let's say they decide to leave and someone has to come in real quick and take over. Maybe you have to jump in and take care of those duties. It's not, having those systems in place means you can more quickly jump back in and take care of those things without having to go through a whole relearning curve to figure out what they were doing to begin with, especially if they were following those processes to begin with.
Absolutely. And the beauty, I love that you mentioned marketing in particular, because I think that's probably the last place that people think that they need to create systems, right? Most of us go to, I got to get my legal work systematized so that I don't have grievance or malpractice risk. But marketing is probably marketing and sales are the two key areas that are what drives money into a business. And so when you start thinking about, well, I'm going to get on stage and I'm going to speak, and you have that in a system, the beautiful thing is that you do get to be divorced from it. In fact, I remember I had a conversation one time with a prospect, and she was really, they had a $1 million law firm, and she was very frustrated because she felt like, I can't grow anymore because I can't do anymore. And we had to have a long conversation about what was going on in the business, why people weren't able to execute. But what it ultimately came down to is that every time something worked, then it required her to do it over again. And I said, well, what if we started strategically moving things off of your plate that could still, if not, sustain the role that you have right now, the work that you have right now, could actually get you further. And she didn't quite understand that. So I started talking to her about public speaking, something she really liked to do. And I said, okay, well, who's the one that determines when you're going to speak? Well, I do. Usually someone approaches me. Okay, so that's very passive. Why don't you decide how often you want to speak and then go look for opportunities, or rather have someone else look for those opportunities? Could we do that? Well, they're not going to know who to call. Well, but you know who to call. Right? Okay, so if you know that information, share that information. Beautiful thing, you can transfer it, right? And then it becomes a matter of, well, what are you going to speak about? Well, I have to write the presentation. Well, do you really? Like, how many times have you spoken now? 20, 30, 50, 100? Don't you know what you generally speak about? Well, yeah, but I write notes. Okay, well, why don't you write your notes now? Just download your brain on all the things that you would tend to speak about. Take a couple of hours. And then you have something that someone else can put into an outline, and they can put some generic points together when you're ready to speak on estate planning 101, or divorce for military spouses, or petty disorderly persons offenses prosecuted in superior court, or whatever it is, right? Whatever your practice area is. But there's a lot of process that I think we have in our heads that are so much a part of our identity as being doers, that if we don't break the mold of saying, I am a doer by virtue of getting things done through other people, that is my function as the CEO of a law firm, then we have to do all of that work, because we haven't created a pathway for other people. And other people aren't going to necessarily know what they can take responsibility for. A lot of times they'll come in and they'll do what the boss tells them to do. So part of your job also is facilitating work through other people by giving them space and freedom to actually ask to make your life easier by helping you.
Yeah. And I love that you brought up marketing, because us as a marketing company, we're trying to build a marketing system for our clients, and, one that they don't have to, actively think about, one that's just running in the background that, is just constantly doing what, we say it's going to do. And, you can even do that, in your law firm, when a lead comes in, have a system in place to where they're going to start getting your marketing and all of that. And so, so many places where systems are important. And so cannot stress that enough. So before we wrap up here, talk a little bit about Law Firm Mentor and your podcast and just how those resources are available and how people can learn more about them.
Yeah, so the podcast is the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast, and we have a variety of guests on, but we also have me on the platform talking about things that really help lawyers to achieve more time and more money, because those are the two universals that I've never met a lawyer that they don't want more of both. So through more money, we help you with your marketing and your sales. Through more time, we help you with your people and your system. So those are the primary pillars, even though we do periodically talk about wellness, finance, things that will affect you as a business owner. So you can always check out the podcast. We're on all the major platforms, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, etc. And if you want to learn more about Law Firm Mentor, one of the things that I highly recommend is our free course on systems. So we created a class, our master class runs now every other month, and our next one is coming up in October, on how to create systems in a law firm and have those systems be created by other people, creating a systems culture. This class is absolutely free. You can check it out at lawfirmmentor.net/masterclass. And when you register, we get you a workbook. We also get you some cool things that you can start using right away to start creating systems in your business in a way that will make it run without you.
Awesome. And I will have that link in the show notes so everybody can go and check it out. That is going to wrap it up for us this week. Just a great conversation. I really did enjoy this one. And so before I let you go, we do have one final question that we ask all of our guests here. And that is, if you had one piece of advice for our lawyers out there, what would it be?
So my one piece of advice for lawyers out there is that you have to start. This is for everybody, right? For all of those thoughts that you have in your mind, all of those things that you're kind of picking up from different places, all of those influencers that you're following, all of those email lists that you're on, don't just consume data and think that you have done something. You have to do something with the information that you're consuming. You have to get into action. So that would be my strong adviso for law firm owners across America.
Awesome. Well, Allison, this has been great. A lot of great insight. Really do appreciate you coming on. That's going to do it for us this week here on Center Stage. Continue to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe on YouTube, wherever you're listening and watching the show. We really do appreciate all of the feedback. That's going to do it for us this week. Allison, thank you.
Thank you, John.
All right. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. To learn more, go to spotlightbranding.com/center stage.